You are desperately trying to hold water in your clenched fist. The tighter you squeeze, the faster it escapes between your fingers. This is not a metaphor for your life. This is your life. Every moment you spend trying to control the uncontrollable, you are engaged in the most exhausting and futile activity imaginable. And yet you persist. You persist because you have been taught that control equals safety, that certainty equals security, that if you can just manage everything perfectly, you will finally be free. But here is the great cosmic joke. The very act of trying to control your life is precisely what imprisons you. I want you to consider something radical. What if the freedom you've been seeking through all your careful planning, all your worrying, all your attempts to manipulate circumstances and people and outcomes, what if that freedom has been waiting for you in the exact opposite direction? What if the only real freedom available to you is the freedom that comes from completely, utterly, absolutely losing control? Now your mind recoils at this. Your ego stands up and protests. But without control, it says, there will be chaos. Everything will fall apart. I need to steer the ship or we'll crash on the rocks. And this is the voice that has been running your life. This is the voice that wakes you at 3 a.m. with worries about the future. This is the voice that replays yesterday's conversations, editing them, wishing you had said something different. This is the voice that never stops planning, never stops defending, never stops trying to make everything turn out the way it should. But who is this I that thinks it's in control? Who is this entity that believes it must manage every detail of existence? When you look closely, when you really investigate this supposed controller, you find something quite remarkable. You find nothing. Or, rather, you find that this sense of being a separate self, isolated inside your skull, controlling a body and a mind, this is a magnificent illusion. It's a trick you've played on yourself so thoroughly that you've forgotten it's a game. The truth is, you are not a puppet master pulling the strings of your life. You are not standing outside of existence, manipulating it from some control room in your head. You are the whole process. The controller and the controlled are the same. When you breathe, are you doing it or is it happening? When your heart beats, are you making it beat or is it beating you? When a thought arises in your mind, did you choose it or did it simply appear? Look at this carefully, because this is where the great liberation begins. Every action you've ever taken, every decision you've ever made, every word you've ever spoken, it all arose spontaneously from the totality of everything that came before it. Your genes, your childhood, your culture, this morning's breakfast, the weather, the position of the stars, the Big Bang itself, all of it converging in this moment to produce what you call your choice. Where in all of this vast web of causation is there room for a separate little you who controls it all? The idea that you are in control is like a wave believing it controls the ocean. The wave rises and falls, and as it rises it thinks, I am making myself tall, I am doing this. And as it falls, it thinks, oh no, I'm losing control, I must try harder. But the wave is the ocean, there is no separation. The waves rising and falling is simply what the ocean is doing at that point. The wave has no more control over its motion than you have control over the thoughts that arise in your mind. And yet somehow you go on believing that you must be in charge. You must control your emotions, control your relationships, control your career contact. Roll your health, control how others perceive you. The list is endless. And the more you try to control, the more anxious you become, because deep down, at a level you rarely acknowledge, you know it's not working. You know that despite all your efforts, life continues to surprise you. Things happen that you didn't plan. People behave in ways you didn't expect. Your own body and mind do things that seem to defy your will. So you try harder, you make more lists, you develop better strategies. You read books on productivity, on manifestation, on positive thinking. You construct elaborate systems to manage your time, your habits, your thoughts. And all of this, every single bit of it, is just the ego's desperate attempt to maintain the illusion that it is separate from life and can therefore control it. But here's what happens when you finally truly let go of control. Not giving up, mind you, that's different. Giving up is resignation, a kind of sulking collapse. No, I'm talking about something else entirely. I'm talking about what happens when you stop resisting what is, when you stop trying to make reality conform to your ideas about how it should be, when you recognize that the controller is itself part of what's being controlled, and that the whole notion of control is a conceptual confusion. What happens is this. You discover that you've been swimming upstream your entire life, and suddenly you turn around and flow with the current. And in that flowing, you find an intelligence, a grace, an effortlessness that was always there but was obscured by your struggle. Life begins to move through you rather than being something you move through. Decisions make themselves. The right words come at the right time. Opportunities appear. Obstacles dissolve, not because you've gained some magical power, but because you've stopped getting in your own way. This is the great secret that the mystics and sages have been pointing to for thousands of years. Wu Wei, the Taoists, called it action wa mao. Without action, doing without doing, not passivity, but a kind of alert responsiveness. Like a skilled sailor who doesn't fight the wind but uses it, works with it, becomes one with it. The sailor doesn't control the wind. The sailor yields to the wind while simultaneously guiding the boat. It's a dance, not a battle. Think of a master musician. When they play, are they controlling every finger movement, every breath, every subtle shift in pressure? If they tried to consciously control all of that, the music would be rigid, mechanical, dead. No, the master has practiced so much that they can let go. And in letting go, the music flows through them. Their training becomes spontaneous. Their knowledge becomes intuitive. They are no longer playing the music. The music is playing them. This is how life wants to work through you. But you can't experience this while you're clenched up, white-knuckling your way through existence, trying to force everything to go according to your plan. The plan itself is the problem, not because planning is wrong. Of course, you need to make decisions, set intentions, take actions. But when you hold those plans rigidly, when you think you know how everything should unfold, when you refuse to adapt and flow with what actually happens, you create suffering for yourself. Consider what happens in your daily life when you lose control, really lose it. Not the catastrophic losses, though we'll get to those, but the small ones. You're stuck in traffic, and there's nothing you can do about it. You've lost control of your schedule. And in that moment, if you can stop fighting, if you can stop fuming and cursing and wishing it were different, something remarkable happens. You notice the sky, you hear the music playing, you breathe, you exist right here, right now, without the burden of trying to be somewhere else. Or you're in a conversation and it's not going the way you planned. You had things you wanted to say, points you wanted to make, an impression you wanted to create, but the other person takes it in an unexpected direction. And if you can let go of your script, if you can stop trying to steer the conversation back to your agenda, you might actually connect with this person. You might hear what they're really saying. You might find yourself saying things you didn't know you thought, because you're responding genuinely rather than performing a rehearsed role. These small losses of control are actually glimpses of freedom. They're cracks in the prison wall of the ego. And if you pay attention to them, if you notice how they feel, you'll realize something extraordinary. The moments when you're not in control are often the moments when you're most alive, most present, most real. But we've been conditioned to fear this. From childhood, you were taught to be in control. Control your emotions. Don't cry, don't shout, don't be too excited. Control your body. Sit still, be quiet. Conform to expectations. Control your desires. Want what you're supposed to want, not what you actually want. Control your image. Be likable, be impressive, be whatever will make others approve of you, layer upon layer of control until you've forgotten what it feels like to simply be. And now, as an adult, you're exhausted. The effort of maintaining all this control is draining the life out of you. You feel like you're constantly managing yourself, monitoring yourself, correcting yourself. There's no rest. Even in your leisure time, you're controlling your relaxation, controlling your fun, making sure you're relaxing the right way, having fun correctly. It's absurd, isn't it? But you can't see the absurdity because you're too busy trying to maintain control. What would happen if you stopped? What would happen if you let yourself feel what you actually feel instead of what you think you should feel? What would happen if you said what you actually think instead of calculating what will create the desired effect? What would happen if you pursued what genuinely interests you instead of what looks good on paper? What would happen if you stopped editing yourself, second-guessing yourself, improving yourself, and just allowed yourself to be? I'll tell you what would happen. You would discover who you actually are. Not the constructed self, not the persona, not the image you've been maintaining, but the raw, unfiltered, spontaneous being that exists before all of that. And you might not like everything you discover. You might find selfishness, pettiness, fear, desire, all the things you've been trying to control and hide. But you might also find creativity, passion, love, humor, and a vitality that you'd forgotten existed. Because here's the thing about control. It doesn't just suppress the bad stuff, it suppresses everything. When you put a dam across a river, you don't get to choose which water gets through. You stop the whole flow. And that's what you've done with your spontaneity, your aliveness, your natural responsiveness to life. In trying to control the undesirable aspects of yourself, you've throttled the whole organism. The great irony is that the things you're trying to control, your anxiety, your anger, your sadness, your desire, these things get worse when you try to control them. Have you noticed this? When you try not to think about something, you think about it more. When you try not to be anxious, you become anxious about being anxious. When you try to force yourself to be happy, you create a tension that prevents genuine happiness. Control is the problem pretending to be the solution. Now, I'm not suggesting you become a chaos agent, throwing all discipline and responsibility to the wind. That's not freedom, that's just another form of control. Control in reverse, the ego asserting itself by deliberately doing the opposite of what's expected. Real freedom is subtler than that. It's not about doing whatever you want whenever you want it. It's about realizing that the you who thinks it's in control is itself a construct, a story, and that when you see through that story, actions arise naturally, appropriately, spontaneously from the whole situation. Think of it like this. Right now, your body is performing thousands of operations without your conscious control. Your immune system is fighting pathogens. Your digestive system is processing food. Your nervous system is coordinating millions of signals. Your cells are dying and being replaced. All of this incredibly complex activity is happening without any input from your conscious mind. In fact, if you tried to consciously control it, you'd fail miserably. Your body has its own intelligence, far more sophisticated than your thinking mind. Why then do you assume that your thoughts, your decisions, your actions need constant conscious control? Why do you believe that without your vigilant management, everything would fall apart? Your body doesn't need you to tell your heart to beat. Your mind doesn't need you to tell it to solve problems. In fact, the best solutions often come when you stop trying and let the mind work unconsciously. Your life doesn't need you to control it. It needs you to live it. The practical question then becomes, how do you live without control? How do you navigate a world that seems to demand planning, decision-making, responsibility? How do you hold a job, maintain relationships, raise children, pay bills, all while surrendering control? This is where most people get confused. They think that losing control means becoming passive, irresponsible, checked out. But that's not it at all. Losing control doesn't mean you stop acting. It means you stop pretending that there's a separate you who stands apart from life and acts upon it. You still make decisions, but you recognize that these decisions are arising from the totality of the situation, not from some isolated ego entity. You still plan, but you hold your plans lightly, ready to adapt when reality presents something different. You still take responsibility, but you recognize that responsibility is simply the ability to respond, not the burden of controlling outcomes. Let me give you an example. Imagine you're walking through a forest, and suddenly you step on a snake. What happens? Before your conscious mind even registers what's happening, your body has already jumped back. Did you decide to jump? Did you deliberate about it, weigh the options, choose the best course of action? No. The response was instantaneous, intelligent, and completely beyond your conscious control. And it was perfect. It was exactly what the situation required. Now imagine living your entire life with that kind of spontaneous intelligence, not through unconscious reflex, though that's part of it, but through a deep attunement to what's actually happening, moment by moment. This is what becomes possible when you stop trying to control everything. You become responsive rather than reactive. You become present rather than lost in planning and worrying. You become available to the wisdom that flows through you when you're not clenching up with effort. In your relationships, this transforms everything. When you stop trying to control how others see you, you become authentic. When you stop trying to control their behavior, you stop being manipulative. When you stop trying to control the outcome of the relationship, you stop being desperate and grasping. What emerges instead is a genuine meeting between two beings, not a transaction, not a performance, not a negotiation, but real human contact. Have you noticed how the best moments with other people happen when you're not trying, when you're not monitoring yourself, not calculating your words, not managing your image? Words. Some magical conversations where time disappears, where you laugh until your stomach hurts, where you feel truly seen and understood. Those don't happen through control. They happen through surrender. They happen when both people drop their guards and simply meet in the present moment. The same is true in your work. The most creative, innovative, inspired work doesn't come from gritting your teeth and forcing it. It comes when you're relaxed, playful, absorbed in what you're doing. It comes when you've stopped worrying about the result and you're simply engaged with the process. Artists know this. Athletes know this. Anyone who has ever been in the zone knows this. That state of flow where everything seems effortless and perfect, that's what life feels like when you stop controlling it. But here's what usually happens. You have one of these moments of flow, one of these glimpses of freedom, and then your ego comes rushing back in. That was great, it says. Now, how do I make that happen again? How do I control this state of not controlling? And just like that, you're back in the trap. You're trying to control your spontaneity. You're trying to force effortlessness. And of course, it doesn't work. This is the subtlest trick of the ego. It will even try to control the process of letting go. It will turn surrender into another achievement, another item on the to-do list. Today, I will be spontaneous. But you can't schedule spontaneity. You can't plan to be present. You can't effort your way into effortlessness. These things happen only when you stop trying to make them happen. So what can you do? The paradox is that you can't do anything, and yet somehow you must. You can't force yourself to let go. That's still control. But you can notice, you can observe, you can see with increasing clarity the ways in which you're constantly trying to control everything. You can watch yourself planning, worrying, managing, defending, and in that watch hour, without judgment, without trying to stop it, something begins to shift. It's like this. Imagine you're watching a movie and you're completely absorbed in it. You've forgotten you're sitting in a theater. You've forgotten it's just light on a screen. You're identified with the characters, caught up in the drama. But then someone walks in front of the projector and suddenly you see the beam of light. You remember where you are. You remember it's just a movie. You don't have to stop watching. In fact, you can continue to enjoy it, but you're no longer lost in it. You're no longer controlled by it. This is what begins to happen when you observe your own controlling behavior. You start to see through it. You recognize it as a pattern, a habit, a story you've been telling yourself. And in that recognition, there's space, there's freedom, not the freedom to control or not control, that's still the ego talking, but the freedom of simply being aware of what's happening. And this is where the real transformation begins. Not in changing yourself, not in becoming a better controller, but in seeing through the entire game of control. You begin to recognize that the you who has been trying so hard to manage life is itself part of life's spontaneous unfolding. The controller is part of what's being controlled. The thinker is part of what's being thought. The experiencer is part of what's being experienced. There's no separation. When this recognition deepens, not as an intellectual concept, but as a lived reality, something extraordinary happens. The burden lifts. Not all at once, perhaps. Not permanently, perhaps. But in moments, in glimpses that become more frequent, you feel what it's like to simply exist without the constant effort of self-management. And it's not what you expected. You thought that losing control would feel like falling. Instead, it feels like flying, because what you discover is that you were never actually in control to begin with. All those years of effort, all that anxiety and stress and planning and worrying, it was like trying to make the sun rise by willing it. The sun was going to rise anyway. Your heart was going to beat anyway. Your life was going to unfold anyway. All you were doing was exhausting yourself with the illusion that you were making it happen. And when you see this, really see it, there's a kind of cosmic laugh that bubbles up from deep inside. How absurd it all was. How earnestly you took yourself and your role as the controller of your destiny. It's like waking from a dream where you were convinced you had to keep the ocean's waves in order and realizing that the waves were always perfectly ordered without any help from you. But this realization doesn't make you passive or nihilistic, quite the opposite. When you stop using all your energy to maintain the illusion of control, that energy becomes available for actually living. You become more creative, not less. More engaged, not less. More responsive to what life is asking of you in each moment. The difference is that now you're dancing with life instead of wrestling with it. Think about the nature of trust, real trust. Not the superficial kind where you say you trust, but you're secretly preparing for betrayal, but genuine, deep trust. What is it? It's the absence of the need to control. When you trust someone completely, you don't need to manage them, monitor them, test them. You simply allow them to be who they are. And in that allowing, something beautiful can unfold between you. What if you could have that same trust with life itself? What if you could trust the intelligence that grows your hair and heals your wounds and dreams your dreams? What if you could trust that the same force that organizes galaxies and orchestrates ecosystems might know what it's doing with your particular life? This isn't blind faith. This isn't believing in some external deity who has a plan for you. This is recognizing that you are not separate from the fundamental intelligence of the universe. You are it. You are the universe experiencing itself through this particular perspective. And from that recognition, a different way of being emerges. You stop fighting against yourself. You stop fighting against others. You stop fighting against reality, not because you've given up, but because you've seen through the fundamental confusion that created the fight in the first place. The confusion that there's a you on one side and life on the other side, and you need to control life to survive and be happy. In truth, there is no you and life. There is only living. There is only this moment, this breath, this sensation, this thought arising and passing away. And when you're fully in that, not thinking about it, not managing it, but actually in it, control becomes irrelevant. The question of who's in control doesn't even arise, because there's no separation between the controller and what's being controlled. This is what the mystics mean when they talk about enlightenment, awakening, liberation. They're not talking about achieving some special state or gaining some supernatural power. They're talking about waking up from the dream of separation, the dream that you're a separate self who must control life to be safe and happy. When you wake up from that dream, you don't become someone else. You simply stop pretending to be someone you never were. And in that stopping, you discover your original nature, not the personality you've constructed, not the image you've maintained, not the story you've been telling about yourself, but the pure awareness that's been here all along, watching it all, containing it all, being it all. This awareness doesn't need to control anything because it is everything. It's not threatened by change because it is change. It's not worried about the future because it's timeless, existing only in this eternal now. Now, I'm not suggesting that you'll reach some permanent state where you never feel the urge to control again. That would just be another form of control, controlling your controlling. What I'm pointing to is more subtle, more forgiving, more human than that. It's the growing capacity to notice when you're clenching, when you're trying to force life to be different than it is, and in that noticing, to soften, to open, to allow. Sometimes you'll catch yourself quickly. You'll notice the tension in your shoulders, the anxiety in your chest, the racing thoughts about the future, and you'll remember, I'm trying to control again. And in that moment of recognition, you can breathe. You can let go just a little. You can relax back into the flow of what's actually happening. Other times you won't notice until much later. You'll realize you've been lost in control for hours, days, maybe weeks, and that's fine too. The noticing itself is the freedom. The awareness itself is the liberation. You don't need to be perfect at this. Perfection is just another control game. You just need to keep waking up, keep seeing through the illusion, keep remembering who you really are, because who you really are is not the controller. You are not the anxious manager, frantically trying to keep all the plates spinning. You are the space in which the plates spin. You are the awareness in which all of this, the anxiety, the control, the loss of control, the freedom, all of it arises and passes away. And that awareness is always free, always at peace, always whole, regardless of what's happening in the content of experience. This is the great secret, the open secret that's been hidden in plain sight your entire life. You don't need to gain freedom. You don't need to achieve enlightenment. You don't need to become someone different or better or more spiritual. You simply need to stop pretending that you're not already free. You need to stop believing in the story of the separate self who must control life to survive. And when you stop believing that story, not through effort, but through seeing it clearly for what it is, you discover that freedom was never something you needed to attain. It was always here, closer than your own breath, more intimate than your own thoughts. It is what you are. It has always been what you are. So here's my invitation to you. Notice the next time you're trying to control something. Feel the tension of it, the exhausting effort of it, and just for a moment experiment with letting go. Not giving up, not checking out, but releasing the grip, opening the fist, allowing life to flow through you rather than trying to force it into your predetermined channels.